So I remember waking up really hungover on Thanksgiving morning, and I was actually at an Airbnb in Palm Springs with a bunch of friends. And my phone was just constantly buzzing with emails, Slack, phone calls. At this time, I was a product manager at Okta and managed their two-factor authentication app. So I called my engineering manager, and he says, Akash, we released a new version of the app last night, and it's breaking for a bunch of users. We need to figure out what to do. So I'm like, okay, time to get into firefighting mode. And I'm used to these kinds of emergencies coming up, but this time was particularly bad because every path that we could take had some compromise and we needed to fix this really fast. So this new version of the app wasn't tested on iOS 12 because we weren't supporting iOS 12 anymore. But while uploading this to the App Store, we forgot to check to exclude iOS 12 devices from this update. So any user on a iOS 12 device whose app had been auto updated overnight was then stuck because there was a big bug at the loading screen itself. So okay, on the one hand, this was only breaking for 2% of our users. But on the other hand, for those 2% of users, there was no path forward because they couldn't even go back to the previous version of the app. We had to find a solution for the 2% without invariably affecting the other 98% of users. And remember, this was Thanksgiving Day. People wanted to be spending the day with their friends and family. A lot of people were traveling and away from their computers. But we set up a virtual war room with the VP of engineering, the head of support, a bunch of engineers, and me representing product. So I really want you to imagine this. I'm at this beautiful Airbnb. All of my friends are playing volleyball in the pool and drinking champagne, and I'm stuck on my laptop in this tiny room figuring out different permutations and combinations of what paths users might have taken and how do we fix each of those. After spending most of the day on this, we were able to stop the bleeding, fix the issue for most of our users, and got everyone back to their families for Thanksgiving dinner. And this was the first thing that nobody told me about product management. You have to handle high stress situations with a lot of ambiguity and bring a sense of calm and understanding to the entire team and situation. The next thing that was a big surprise for me was that product managers don't have any actual authority. Yes, product managers are responsible for choosing the right problems to solve, defining what success looks like, and working with the teams to execute against that vision. But nobody actually reports to the product managers. And that's actually by design because if the engineers and designers reported up to the product managers, they wouldn't be incentivized to have differences of opinion and fight back. Instead, the role of a product manager is designed in such a way that they have to execute and make all of their impact by influencing other people and influencing teams about their vision of the world rather than just dictating what needs to be done. I remember for one of my first product specs that I wrote, I actually just emailed it out to all the teams and then thought I could move on to the next thing. I was so wrong because I got a bunch of replies on email and in person from people asking clarifying questions, scenarios that I had missed, differences of opinion, trade-offs that I hadn't considered, and a bunch of different things that I should have anticipated better. So I wiped the slate clean and said, okay, let me start over. And I first sat with each team to understand where they are coming from and what their vision of that product is and what are the things that I need to consider. Stakeholder management is a key part of the role, and more than 50% of my time goes into evangelizing my vision of the product and getting feedback from all stakeholders on that vision. Okay, this next point is best described through a story with one of my direct reports. So as it came time for promotion season, one of my reports wanted to know the criteria for getting promoted to the next level. But the answer was actually much more complex and vague than she had anticipated. The fact is that PM career progress isn't as structured and straightforward as other roles like engineering, consulting, design, or marketing. Engineering roles, for example, are very structured with set criteria and objectives for you to progress to the next level. Also, these skills are transferable and measurable across companies, allowing the leveling to be somewhat consistent across different companies and teams. And the same thing for design. The parameters of UX, visual design, empathy, research, etc. are all judged based on designs that designers actually ship out. After spending years in this role and speaking to product managers across companies and locations, it's clear that there is no standard way to judge and measure the performance of a product manager. Broadly speaking, something that I learned from Shreyas Doshi is that performance can be broken into three parts: insight, execution, and impact. From there, the weightage of each of these three sections should be adjusted based on the specific PM role that we're talking about. So, for example, for a 0 to 1 PM, the insight and execution sections should be higher weighted than the impact section. But for a growth PM, the impact is actually the most important thing that they should be judged on. Sadly, all of this complexity means that organizations are susceptible to promoting PMs based on politics, leadership dynamics, and just how good of a manager you have. Now, before I get to my biggest surprise about product management, I want to first talk about experimentation. For any other role, experimentation isn't seen as a core skill set. You don't want marketing to be experimenting with ad channels. You don't want engineering to be experimenting with some unproven algorithms. You don't want design to be experimenting with different languages and design aesthetics for each feature and each version of the product. But for product managers, experimentation is the name of the game. It's not as wild as picking numbers on a Las Vegas roulette wheel, but it is actually very similar to playing high stakes poker. You have to analyze the strategies of the other players at the table, the flow of the game, who's the whale and who's the shark. However, when you get a pair of kings, you have to embrace the odds and play the hand hard. There's a term in poker called resulting, where the players will tightly couple the quality of the outcomes with the quality of the decision. So this is where someone who plays a bad hand and wins actually thinks that they made a good decision, whereas someone who plays a good hand and loses will think that they made a bad decision. But this kind of thinking will get you into a lot of trouble. You have to make the best decision with the information available to you at that time. And then the final outcome is a factor of luck as well as decision making. So as a PM, you have to embrace ambiguity and take calculated bets and make the best decision with the information available to you. But if the market changes or if there's some externality that affects your product, don't take it too hard, because that's just part of the experimentation process. Use all of that information and learning to make better decisions the next time. And now the biggest surprise about product management is the amount of storytelling that I have to do. Since I have to make all of my impact through influence and not authority, I have to tell very compelling stories about my vision and why all of the teams should believe in that same vision. This sounds easy, but it's something that I have been learning and improving at for the past many years. I've been painstakingly looking at a bunch of different storytelling frameworks to see what can be used for me as a product manager. And this is a skill that becomes more important as you become more senior. I wish I had started learning this much earlier in my career. So your first resource should be this book called Building a Story Brand. And in this video, I break down the core framework in this book to tell you exactly how you should be telling stories.